If you feel like you're spending more and more time working outside of actual regular working hours, then not only are you one of many, but you're one of so many that this phenomenon has been given a name. It's been dubbed the infinite workday, which frankly sounds about as dystopian as it gets. CNN starts us off today. Workers who are struggling to cope with a, quote, seemingly infinite workday involving an increasing load of meetings scheduled at 8 p.m. or later, and a near constant stream of interruptions, according to new research by Microsoft. The company analyzed data from users of Microsoft 365 services, which include Outlook and PowerPoint, globally between mid-January and mid-February. It found that the number of meetings booked between 8 p.m. and just before midnight had risen 16% compared with last year. Geographically dispersed teams, as well as those with flexible working arrangements, were responsible for much of that increase. And I think here we have two notable things. The first is that the amount of people that are working late has increased, and at the same time, the amount of people working internationally has increased as well. And honestly, working those odd hours is not really an issue as long as you're clocking your 40, maybe up to 45 hours per week. If you want to work, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or noon to 8 p.m., that's not really an issue. The issue is when you have to start work at 9 a.m. and then instead of getting off at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, you have to go till 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or some of these 8 p.m. or later meetings. Lots of people work weird hours. Think like night shift in factories or, medical facilities. But this isn't a night shift. This is people having a shift with no start or finish. This is an infinite shift. The infinite workday starts early, mostly in email, and quickly swells to focus, sapping floods of messages, meetings, and interruptions, Microsoft said in a report Tuesday. The company found that the average worker is interrupted every 2 minutes by a meeting, an email, or chat notification during the standard 8-hour shift, adding up to 275 interruptions per day. And those messages don't stop after they've clocked off. During the study period, the average employee sent or received 58 messages outside of their core working hours, a jump of 15% from last year. The typical worker receives 117 emails per day, and by 10 p.m., almost one-third of employees are back in their inboxes, pointing to a steady rise in after-hours activity, Microsoft noted. And every 2 minutes is an insane amount of time to be interrupted by anything. The efficiency of work you are able to do if you have to look at something and are getting distracted by messages, meetings, emails, notifications, what have you, every 2 minutes is got to be just astronomical. If you are unable to work for more than 2 minutes without having to do something else, then you never get into your kind of flow state of work where you're able to accomplish a lot in a short amount of time, because you constantly have to be doing something else. It feels like people are no longer able to just work on one task until it's done. They have to work on one task until something else now is popping up, and seemingly almost every 2 minutes, and then they have to go work on that task and then come back to the first task, but then they kind of are out of the zone and they have to remember where they were, but then there's another notification distracting their time and attention to something else, and it just kind of becomes a really inefficient cycle. And we know this cycle is getting inefficient because people are working after 10 p.m. more often than essentially they ever have since Microsoft started recording this data. And that's probably because they're not getting enough done during the workday because they're being constantly interrupted. And being always online or always available to be contacted for these meetings or emails or messages is really a big struggle of remote work. There's essentially no work-life balance. There's no going to talk to someone in person and hashing something out super quick. Instead, it turns into email chains or messages or just some other means of communication that takes forever. And there's also no leaving work when you work from home or work remotely, especially in the modern digital age. And this leads people to basically feel like they have to do late night shifts in order to keep up with everything that they have going on. And CNN gets to the crux of the issue here in this section. The modern workday for many has no clear start or finish, the company said in its report. As business demands grow more complex and expectations continue to rise, time once reserved for focus or recovery may now be spent catching up, prepping, and chasing clarity. It's the professional equivalent of needing to assemble a bike before every ride. Too much energy is spent organizing chaos before meaningful work can be done. And this is one of the big downsides of remote work. Don't get me wrong, I fully support remote work. I work remotely currently, and I absolutely love it. But the inability to just walk over to someone's desk and ask a question without it turning into a long message thread is a huge loss for companies and employees everywhere. And additionally, every non-private chat message becomes something that lots of people can suddenly weigh in on, and it makes things way more difficult because there's suddenly far more people than originally intended involved in something. I'm sure you've all experienced you asking one employee a question in a Slack thread that's public, and then a bunch of other people start weighing in, and maybe managers get involved or the manager's managers get involved and they want want something different or something tweaked or seeing something that they don't like, and just it becomes a whole long conversation and discussion because it's in messages that probably shouldn't have been public in the first place, and it just ends up forcing things to take longer than they have to. And that's all because it was a public Slack thread instead of just walking over to their desk and asking them a question. Ultimately, Microsoft said meeting-hungry bosses and colleagues sap workers' productivity, with some time-starved employees forced to catch up on the weekend. Instead of deep work, prime hours are spent cycling through a carousel of calls, the company noted. Basically, all of these messages and meetings are just preparing you to do work that you are then interrupted every 2 minutes while doing, and as such are not able to do as well or as quickly. And in addition to that, bosses, as noted here, just have access to employees in a way that they didn't before remote work and the rise of the digital age and working. Now, looking at this data, we know that this is happening. The question is, why are workers choosing to work both before regular work hours and then staying on after regular work hours? And as I thought about this, I think there are three big things here that are at play causing this phenomenon. The first, I think, is the rise of the grind set mindset and the toxic productivity cycle that we see everywhere. A second, I think, is a fear of layoffs. And a third, I think, is a concern about AI replacing low-level jobs. I want to start with the first one, which is toxic productivity. The shift to remote work and hybrid work models during and after the COVID-19 pandemic has amplified toxic productivity for many. Employees now grapple with blurred boundaries between personal life and professional life, often feeling like they need to be, quote, always on. The absence of clear start and end times to the workday can result in prolonged working hours, making it difficult to disconnect. A survey conducted by Microsoft in 2022, so this article is a bit old, found that nearly half of remote workers reported increased workloads and greater difficulty in unplugging, contributing to higher stress levels. And this older report is saying almost exactly what the new report found, except the only difference is the new report found that this phenomenon is far more pronounced and is becoming worse as time goes on. If you're always accessible, then that makes people feel like they always should be working. If you're used to doing what your boss tells you to do during work hours, then if they message you at 5:15 right after work hours or 5:30 when you're technically done with work but you haven't gotten up from your desk yet, then you might feel obligated to continue to do what they ask you to do after work hours as well. And additionally, if you work in an environment where you see a lot of coworkers always being on and everyone sees everyone else always being on, then that makes it feel like they have to also always be on in order to fit in with the company culture and not get fired. So then everybody's on because everyone else is on, and it leads to this toxic spiral where everyone's only on because all the other people are on, but all the other people are only on because everyone else is on. And then your only options become either one, to do it because everyone else is doing it, or to quit. But quitting is terrifying. But if you don't do it, then you might get laid off or fired. And I think this brings us pretty well to the second point. And before we go any further, if you like this kind of video, I have a channel that I post 1 or 2 times a week, and I'd love a subscription. So the second point is a fear of layoffs. And this kind of makes sense. If you think the economy is going to get worse, then you would obviously logically work harder so that if there are layoffs at your company, you're doing so well that they couldn't afford to lay you off. Rather, they would lay off other lower performers. And I couldn't find an article specifically to talk about this because I don't really know what the article would be about or how the phenomenon of work harder so you don't get laid off would even be kind of turned into something worth studying. But I did find this Reddit post that I feel like relays what I'm thinking about very clearly. Anyone else burning out due to fear of being laid off? My performance reviews are excellent and I hit all my KPIs. Not sure leadership really cares about my KPIs, but I can't help but feel that that's somehow not enough to keep my job due to macroeconomic pressure and the current fundraising environment. This has led me to working more hours and burning myself out in order to squeeze out every last drop of production out of myself to please as many stakeholders as possible, hoping to stay in good graces with people with influence. I know how to prioritize well, and I know in a normal environment I would be in a very safe position. I've seen no indication that I will get laid off. I'm a high performer, but that doesn't seem to mean it will not happen. My company is not in financial distress, but we're in extend the runway cut headcount mode to survive another 2+ years without raising capital. I know some of this is out of my control and I should probably just chill, but I feel extra pressure since I don't have much experience. With limited experience in this job market, knowing how to find another PM or product management role could take me a very, very long time. Anyone else feeling this kind of burnout and stress? And I think this is a really relatable post. If you think there's a chance that you're going to be laid off, then you have to outwork everyone else to make sure it's not you that gets laid off. But then the funny part is that working harder may or may not actually help. It kind of just depends on which AI is able to take over which jobs, and how good you are at that job may not matter if there's a computer that can do it cheaper and faster. And speaking of AI, that leads us to our final point, which is it makes a lot of sense to work more during all hours if you think that you might get replaced by AI soon. And I actually have no article here. I want to speak personally from my experience because I work in the advertising industry. Honestly, I don't feel like my job is going to be around in between maybe 5 or 10 years. I think it's just too automatable to run digital ads. And so I'm in a position where I need to work hard and rise high enough to be above the AI replacement level that I genuinely believe that I am currently at. And so I work hard, sometimes even after hours, so I can be promoted to a management position that's less likely to get replaced. Now, to be fair, it does help that I really enjoy my job, but there is a lot of motivation in knowing that it might not exist in a few years. Now, interestingly enough, the only solution that is offered by the report by Microsoft and the articles talking about the report is using AI to free up the tasks that humans are currently doing and that's taking them forever and they're being interrupted a lot for, so that the humans themselves can work on more important things and be able to do it more efficiently. But I feel like that's kind of a weird solution to offer, because I feel like AI is a significant part of the reason that we have issues like this in the first place. Imagine setting someone's house on fire and then offering to sell them fire suppression systems right afterwards. Like, that's what this is. Thanks for watching.